I haven't sung Lift High the Cross in about 20 years. It felt good to sing that today. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Chris Gloff, and I'm the band and worship leader for the contemporary worship service here at Westminster. In addition, I'm a teacher at Crown Point High School. This here today is my fourth time speaking at Westminster. I preached at WPC when I was 17, once when I was in my early 20s, again in my mid-30s, and now today in my mid-40s. I'm starting to think they ask me to speak, don't care for it very much, and then it takes a decade for them to forget about it and ask me back again. So hopefully I'll be asked back to do it again in my 50s. I've been a member of this church since 1979 when my parents moved our family here from the East Coast. I was 9 years old, and my parents were drawn to everything WPC embodied: youth programming, music, worship, mission, prayer, fellowship. A few weeks ago, I thought again of how this church impacted my life. During the last 35 or so years, I was involved in Sunday school, Midler's high school youth group, Joyful Strains choir, middle school boys choir. We actually had one back then, and we all had matching jackets that our moms made. I worked on numerous passion plays and living nativities. I worked with Darlene to develop a relationship with the homeless shelter in Hammond in the late 80s. I did a college internship here in the late 80s. I met my best friend here. I directed 4 summers of youth musicals for the Samaritan Center. I played in a Christian golf league and a Christian softball league during my summers in college. We've had coffee houses. I'm a deacon. I met my wife in South Hall. We taught 3rd grade Sunday school together while dating. We attended Christmas progressive dinners together. We worked VBSs together. We were married here. Our sons were baptized here. And memorial services for 4 members of our family have taken place in this sanctuary. That's a lot of stuff. I suppose you could look at that and say, if you're in a place for a long time, you're bound to do lots of things. But what if I told you that 95% of all the events and activities I just mentioned took place between 1979 and 1996? I can't tell you why exactly, but I've done little in the last 20 years here at WPC other than leading worship and playing in the band each week. Kristen and I have talked about this a lot. We haven't been a part of the tapestry of this church for, well, a while now. Now, to be fair, in 1996, I accepted a call to be the director of music at First Presbyterian Church of Crown Point. I directed the adult and youth choirs. I started a handbell choir. I led VBS music. All sorts of things from 1996 to 2002, when I accepted my second call back here at Westminster after a call from Dick Rogers. So from 2002 to now, I've slowed down a lot here at church. And I really don't have a clear-cut answer for you this morning on why that is. Maybe it was because of caretaking for my parents as their health declined from 2003 until 2012. Or maybe it was my work as a teacher and all the extracurricular activities and teams I'd coached over the years. Maybe it was the birth of my first son, Christopher. Or maybe our lives had just, well, shifted. I mean, it happens, right? We hear the term paradigm shift thrown around a lot these days. Our view of the world, work, our families, heck, our view of life even changes, right? I thought about this. When I first started teaching, this is what students brought to school to learn: Now, 20-some years later, this is the tool I use most to teach and the tool that students use most to learn. Things like projectors and screens and smartboards and e-texts. When I first started teaching, I met a teacher in the building who I admired. During my prep periods, I asked if I could sit on his class so that I could glean anything and everything I could learn from him. I mean, the students loved this guy, and they learned so much from him. He was like a college professor in his style and the way he would engage the students in the learning process. And all he used was a blackboard, a piece of chalk, his brain, and charisma. So, I modeled my teaching style after him, even though we taught two completely different subject areas. And it worked. I developed strong relationships with students. They were well behaved and they were successful. Until about 9 or 10 years later, when I noticed my students looked bored every time I lectured. Behavior incidents increased. I didn't have the same bond. So I tried harder to do what I had always done. I tried wacky bits to wake them up and engage them. And it didn't work. Now, right about this exact same time, administrators of schools started talking about technology and learning. One-to-one laptop settings, integrated learning platforms. Smartphones had begun to emerge during this time as well. But most veteran teachers dug in hard. They were against all of this. They stood by what they had done the last 30 years of their careers. Nothing would take the place of lecture, rote memorization, practice, homework, and traditional testing, they said. And I didn't know what to do. What I was doing wasn't working, but I really didn't have any idea on how to fix it. And this was my career. That summer, during a professional development course, the professor showed a video called Shift Happens. The video has been revised and updated every so often to keep it relevant. It started very mild and talked about emerging technologies, and it's been revised every year to date. And I want to show you just a taste, just a minute of this video to give you a taste of what its message was. And it goes on. There are portions in it that talk about the number of divorces that occur because of Facebook posts. It talks about all sorts of social media, posting, Pinterest, Instagram. It goes on and on and on. And the video ends with the simple phrase, shift happens. As a teacher, the thing that really stood out to me was the technology and the information changing so fast in today's world that half of what technology students learn in college their first year will be outdated by their junior year. I saw this video and something clicked. I felt I needed to shift the way I viewed education, or I wasn't going to be able to help students the way I wanted, or more importantly, the way students needed. It's difficult even now for me to explain where Crown Point High School has gone with education during the last decade. This year, for the very first time, every student from kindergarten to 12th grade will have a netbook. All of the teachers have been working numerous hours over multiple years to develop blended learning courses for the respective subject areas. Now, don't get me wrong. It's not that we've just taken the material we've taught over our careers and put it into a computer and said, here, learn. Technology isn't the focus of this educational paradigm shift. It's how we use technology to help facilitate learning for our students and their diverse needs, backgrounds, and learning styles. In any given lesson, there may be 5 different ways students can choose from to learn content. Whether it's a video or online guided learning activity or a self-imposed quiz so that they can self-check for understanding. Make them owners of their education. And teachers are still at the heart of developing relationships with students and guiding them in their learning. Education has shifted from being all about the material or content matter being taught to being about the learner and how best to serve them in their educational journey. Has it been a completely smooth transition? No way. Some teachers and students resisted the shift immediately, but over time, many, if not most from my perspective, have seen the transformational power of this shift. And it's a lot easier to look back now and see that it was the right thing to do and a necessary shift for that particular community. Hindsight is always 20/20, right? I think back to my first call as music director of First Presbyterian Church. During the interview process, Pastor Clinton Roberts said they were looking for a music director to lead their choirs for traditional worship. I thought, I could do that. I was raised here around traditional music and worship. However, a month or so on the job, and Clint said he wanted to try some new things in the fall. He wanted to have a day filled with church programming every Sunday, including dinner together. And he wanted to start a contemporary worship service. FPC had an associate pastor from California who was the same age as me, had been studying contemporary music in California, and played electric guitar. They told me he would work with me to get things going. And that was a deal breaker. I didn't know any contemporary Christian music, and whatever I'd heard of it in the past wasn't anything I was interested in. Plus, I was now going to be spending the entire day at church on Sundays, the entire day. But I had just started my work at FPC and felt like it was what I had to do as I was told. So this over 100-year-old church, who had previously had 2 traditional worship services every Sunday morning, was about to be split into 1 traditional worship service and 1 contemporary worship service every Sunday morning. The first Sunday, I stood up front with an acoustic guitar, and the church organist, who had been there for 30-plus years, was on a keyboard behind me as we thumped and strummed our way through Lord, I Lift Your Name on High. 18 people sat in the pews. I know because I counted them. And they all sat there with their arms crossed, looking very angry at me. Every Sunday, someone stopped me on the way out, asking if I could throw in a traditional hymn every once in a while. I asked Pastor Roberts, and he said, just keep doing what you're doing. He said, have faith and keep moving forward. After worship during the Sunday programming, I participated in Bible studies. We had youth choir rehearsals while the adults participated in small group programming. And then we all ate dinner together before we left. Over the course of 2 years, we saw more and more people at the contemporary worship service, young couples, families, people looking for a new start in the church. And at the end of our 3rd year, the contemporary service averaged a higher attendance than the traditional service. The church even voted to demolish the over 100-year-old sanctuary offices and social center and erect new ones. We built a state-of-the-art sanctuary with video projection and sound and a balcony seating area. Pastor Roberts saw a need in the community and shifted the way the church ministered to the people of that community. During the process, people came out of the woodwork, sharing their talents to lead the countless ways required to make this story a success. Again, I resisted from the start, but when I look back, it's all clear now. Our pastor emeritus, and one of the smartest guys I know, Dick Rogers, remains a great role model for me today. He walks the walk. He says what he means, and he means what he says. And he was always looking forward. He recognized the need to grow socially through fellowship in the 80s and guided us to the building of the South Hall. The middle section of the church wasn't practical for the programming of WPC in the mid-90s, and he steered us towards knocking the center of the building down and building a new one which fostered fellowship, small group programming, and a preschool. He had a way of empowering people, giving them courage and a vision, and bringing everyone together, working toward a common goal. Dick Rogers had the ability to create opportunity for people to grow together. Looking back, I don't know that I would have seen the need for those building projects, and they were expensive. But those tools helped this church grow and be vital in our greater community. The question now is, where is God calling us as a church today? That's a difficult question to discern for sure, but a vital one, as this should be the roots of what we plan and program for over the next few years. Today's scripture from Acts 2 says, day by day, as they spent much time in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. and day by day the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. Throughout my life, I've had lots of questioning and guilt regarding prayer. I used to have guilt about asking God for specific things in prayer. I remember even praying for certain things for church at times. Strength, courage. Heck, I pray for new members and church growth all the time. When I was in high school, I used to pray in bed before falling asleep. Only a majority of the time, I fell asleep while praying. I felt guilty for doing that for years. And then one day, during a small group activity here at church, I was sharing about my guilt, and a wise elderly woman said, "I can't think of a better way of falling asleep than in the security and grace of prayer with God." An instant paradigm shift for me. I believe in prayer, I really do. But I've always believed life as a Christian involves more than prayer. Life as a Christian involves action. Hollywood has created a number of movies involving God as a character. I've seen a number of different portrayals. I even saw a movie where pop singer Alanis Morissette takes a shot at the role. But I think most of us think of two actors when it comes to the role of the Almighty. If you're old enough, the first to come to mind is George Burns. However, with the loss of George Burns, Morgan Freeman has taken over the role during the last decade or so. In 2007, Freeman portrayed God in Evan Almighty, a contemporary take on the story of Noah's Ark. And in the film, Steve Carell portrays the character which represents Noah, and his wife and children thinks he's lost it. He tells them that God has appeared to him and told him to build the ark. And the family thinks he's nuts. His wife takes their children away for a few days in an attempt to give her husband some time to work through what she thinks is a midlife crisis. She sits in a diner, distraught, contemplating how to handle this. She loves her husband and trusts him, but is having difficulty reconciling the fact he is acting like a lunatic. And Morgan Freeman appears before her as a waiter in the diner, and I love what he says about opportunity. Check out his name tag in this clip. I believe this church is a love story about people believing in each other. It's endured a lot of paradigm shifts over the years, and I think we are in the midst of one now. Why have I done less stuff here at WPC over the last 15 years? Perhaps my needs have changed. And if my needs have changed, I imagine lots of people's needs have changed. Maybe hospitality in the church still requires lots of prayer, worship, fellowship, programming, and breaking of bread, but maybe we're being pushed to find new ways of being hospitable and welcoming. Maybe we're being asked to look at visitors more like guests and create worship, fellowship, and programming that fit more of their needs. I'll give you a quick example. 30 years ago, I would never have imagined youth sports taking place on Sundays. Today, every youth sport seems to schedule games on Sundays. I know because my son plays one game or another nearly every Sunday, from soccer to baseball to basketball. Pastor Quincy's kids play town soccer, and we were talking a month or so ago how ironic it is that the pastor's family has to figure out a way for the kids to get to soccer games while dad is preaching. Do we fight this trend, or do we adapt to reach people who are trying to balance both worlds? Every organization or business must adapt and evolve to the trends of society or face extinction, right? It is unnerving that the church has taken a backseat to societal trends. But it concerns me even more to know that people are leaving the church because churches can be resistant to adapting to the needs of our current 24/7 plugged-in lifestyle. You see, we can't demonstrate to someone that they need the church unless the church is available to them when they're available so that we can show it to them. I certainly don't have all the answers, but I do know our world is changing faster than ever, and it's up to us to determine the best way we can serve others. Fundamentally, most of us go to church expecting our own needs to be met. We have the attitudes of guests rather than hosts. But what if we shifted our attitudes and became the hosts God wants us to be? willing to make changes that serve our guests, thus further our mission to spread God's word. That sounds like real hospitality to me, an ancient but overlooked Christian practice. And it's a major shift in attitude that even the most liberal churches in America are challenged to make. Maybe this is an opportunity for us to give our best, to serve the needs of our guests, to add to those saved by God's grace. Maybe this is an opportunity for us to shift, because whether we like it or not, shift happens. Amen.